me and you had kind of had a tiff over it, where you were like, frig it, I said it, like, you don't need to worry, and I was like, no, like, we need to be sensible here.
And then we took our clothes off and had sex.
Every time that person puts up like ask me a question, I keep going like, when are you free in Belfast? Because I'm like, you know what, like, what are you gonna lose? Do you know what I mean? So like, I've messaged him a few times, and like but the thing
Ross
is,
every day, it's like, please.
the thing is
Ross will be like, I've been fucking messaging you for a year.
Here's the crack, here's the crack, here's the crack, here's the crack, here's the crack. Welcome back, talking shit, I'm drinking wine, like and subscribe. Here's the crack.
how's it going, people? Welcome back to another episode of the Here's the Craic podcast, episode number 50. How are we feeling?
Good.
I feel like we should edit like a round of applause in there.
That's how you never done it.
Can't believe we made it.
So yeah, this podcast is going to be pretty generic. We're just going to chat about like
The podcast.
the podcast in general.
The podcast about the podcast.
A podcast about podcasting.
To end all podcasts.
The last one. Ended here.
Obviously 50th episode, 50 podcasts have been released. I was actually looking back at a few of the podcasts we'd done at the very start, and I was kind of like, oh, we have come pretty far.
Yeah.
If you think about the tribe that we recorded at the start.
So it always worries me, like, when people are like, oh yeah, like, I want, like, we've got a few messages where like there'll be ones like, oh lads, love the podcast, just listen to like every episode, and I'm just like, I can't believe you listened past like the first or second episode, because it's just woeful, isn't it?
Do you remember like the first couple where we recorded with one mic?
I remember whenever we first started, it was a case of like, oh, we're just going to order these 3 mics and like just plug them in the laptop, and like it's going to sound so good.
Yeah.
And then the first time we ever done it was like, why isn't this working? Because GarageBand was just like, nice try.
I remember we spent 4 hours one day
Yeah.
trying to get the USB mics to like sync up and work together.
The first podcast we done, we were like, yeah, we've got the mics, it's going to be so handy, set up.
Yeah.
I think like, oh, if you come up for this time, we'll set up and get it done by this time, and it was like literally spending hours just trying to get it working. And then
what absolute tripe did we end up doing at the start? I feel like at the start we record it off, I record it off my laptop, like my mic, and then you record it off yours.
We all bought our own mics, but they're all like USB ones, but obviously like your laptop only has 2 USB ports, so we thought we'd be bad boys and get the adapter. Remember we got the 4-port one?
Yeah.
I know, yeah.
And then like, I don't know whether it was
I know
it
what
or
happened.
USBs.
You used to
Didn't
got
work.
the same mic, and then I already had like a mic, like one of those mics just for like PlayStation that you plug in, like a USB one. I can't remember why I got it.
And you two got USB ones and I got AUX ones.
But because
Yeah.
you've got the same, because you've
Fucking
got the same mic, when we went to record, your mic was showing up as 1 when it was in reality it was 2. Because we got like an adapter for connecting the 2 of them. So then we just ended up recording off mine, just sitting it in the middle of the table.
Yeah, our first 6 podcasts were just completely one mic in the middle of the table and us all hunched around it.
Was it?
Yeah.
6?
Yeah.
It must have been a good 6
Holy
episodes.
I,
shit.
I specifically remember the one you done with Bruna and her sister, and you were all sitting around and the mic was like right in the centre and he was all like leaning into it.
I remember like, it must have been well in when you were like, yeah, I was talking to this guy about doing the podcast, and he basically said, this is what we need to get. We probably should have done it at the very start, huh?
But I think that's sort of a good thing to start on, is that like there's a lot of podcasts starting now, and you can see them sort of like, you've sent in a few about like people Northern Ireland stuff starting podcasts, and like a lot of people we've chatted to, like well-known people, have all said, okay, I'd love to start a podcast. We didn't have any advice, like we didn't know anything whenever we started this. It was literally like, and I feel like that's not to get sentimental or anything, but like when you look at where we're at now, we're not like millions of followers, but at the same time it's like from building from 3 people who didn't know a thing about podcasts and didn't have any connections within that sort of like, because I feel like there is like a cushy wee world of like, you know, people, and we're only really starting to like get to know people now.
Yeah,
we didn't know anything, so like everything we've done is just from the ground up.
I think like when we started, like you were sort of like, you would never have thought to reach out to people because you're like, oh, they'll not reply. But then I think when it came to like trying to get guests on, and we got like the likes of Dave Elliott and like Aaron McCann and people like, oh, they do podcasts, and like how sound they were, like, I think if we'd just like reached out to someone like that, it probably would have just like avoided the whole thing.
Yeah, whenever you see a lot of podcasts starting, it takes a while for them to get up and running in terms of like your graphics, like how, whereas I think that's one thing that if we hadn't have spent the time at the start being like, right, this is the name, we spent a lot of time in researching, like thinking of the name.
Yeah.
Then you spent a lot of time on like designing the actual logo and like making sure like everything like cop like text and stuff and was worded perfectly, because how many people at the start said to us, I probably wouldn't have responded to you if it wasn't for the fact like your branding's spot on, like. So maybe that's one thing we did do well.
I think if I hadn't, I think the branding was always good. Like, we're still using the same logo and stuff. I think if I hadn't got that right at the start, probably wouldn't stopped, I'd say.
Oh, if it looked like absolute like 2013 word art vibes, like with the wee drop shadowing and stuff, it would have been like, this isn't going anywhere.
Was there any points where you sort of thought like, oh, this isn't going anywhere? Like, was there any ever a point you were just going to be like, lads, I think it's time to call it a day?
Plenty of times, like, because
for me, like, I think we done that Johnny B podcast. I done like gym equipment and stuff for him, and he was like training me, so I was just like, oh, get him on to chat about like health and fitness and stuff, and he'd obviously like competed in like those bodybuilding competitions, but like I think before that we'd done, how many episodes would have done then?
11.
So I think I was sort of like, because we were doing the TikToks and being consistent and stuff, and I was like, oh, like we weren't really getting that good of views. And then the podcast before we'd done was like the one we chatted about like the whole Stephen Nolan thing.
Oh yes.
And then like just
the
him. Yeah, so like we done that, and then I literally posted that clip that day we were doing it with Johnny B, and like looked on my phone after the podcast, and I'd like, you know when like TikTok is like, if you've a load of notifications it's like 99 plus, and I was like, holy shit. And I think it had got like, at that stage it was like near 100,000 views or something, and I like after that it's like, right, there's potential here.
I think we always knew it had potential. Between the three of us, I don't think we would have done it if we didn't. Like, I remember sitting in Costa that day, and even at that stage, like, I even look at it from that point of view where you're like, I didn't really know you at the time. Like, you were just Tommy's mate that like walked into the kitchen if we were all going out drinking or something. It would have been like, oh, there's Shay, and like we would have like got to know each other. But like,
I just lived under Tommy's bed and just randomly showed up when you were there
from time after time. But like, if you do look at it, it's like, right, like look how far that's come in terms of like, we've all, I feel like it's brought us closer. We're a close knit group. But I think when you start something like that, there's plenty of times where you're like, yeah, I'm gonna pack this in.
Where was there, what would have been your point? Was there any point where you're like, oh, after?
I feel like when you start something like this, and that would be the advice I would give to a lot of people who would like be planning on like doing something with other people. I feel like if we hadn't have quickly learned to like take each other's criticism on the chin, because there was a few times where I felt like it was definitely taking a strain on everyone's friendship, not just like, you know, when you get into this, you're essentially, you're three mates, but you're also running,
you're trying to make
kind of like a business.
You're
trying essentially
to improve it,
and it's only recently where I think like, if you look at how much we've all matured in the past year and a half, like we're like, right, this is your job, get it done, this is your job, get it done. Whereas at the start it was kind of like, oh, I'm good at this, so I'm going to do that, oh, I'm good at this, I'm going to do that. Whereas I feel like now it's like we've all matured in terms of like, it is what it is, and them times I was like, yeah, this is not worth it.
Remember like one time you were like ready to be like, I can't be asked this anymore?
I feel like at the start, definitely at the start, whenever we'd first started and we're trying it, I feel like there was definitely a transition period of like 15 episodes where you can definitely see we're doing different stuff and we're trying to get it on its feet. The Nolan thing was a big one, because I was like, right, I suppose I wasn't that, because I'm quite like nervous about like what people think and stuff like that there. I've got better at it now, but like I was thinking, oh crap, like this Nolan thing's went mad, and all I thought was he's gonna have us in the show in the morning,
like he's gonna come after us and stuff, and me and Shay were like, you need to wise up.
Like I feel like that's definitely for me has been something where, and there has been other occasions which like we're not gonna get into because it couldn't be arsed, like times where we've done stuff and it's, I wouldn't say it's backfired, but at the same time, like it's brought up this sort of stuff that we're like, right, we didn't want that to happen. There was no reason for it to happen, and just got sucked into crap. Like, and I think them are the times where I felt like it was like, right, I felt almost like it was a wee bit like embarrassing. Whereas now, like people chat to me about it, and I'm like, yeah, like because it's doing and because it's more mature now. Yeah. Like I know we still have the occasional chats, and it's like a bit like, you know, a bit of banter, and it's a bit like sort of people could turn around and be like, oh, that's so immature, but like it's just Craic, like three friends would have like sitting around at a pub or something. Whereas you know, we're interviewing people now, and like I love chatting to people about what we do. Like that's class.
What about you?
I'd say probably a couple of months ago, like, before we realised we're moving out of your house and all that, and everything just started to seem to go to shit. Like.
Yeah.
It was like, I think it was maybe a month or two ago. Like, everything was just falling. It was before the Juice Jar podcast.
Yeah.
Everything was falling to shit. I just couldn't be fucked editing like to get like 10 views on a video. Like,
Yeah.
you're spending like hours and all that. And I think the turning point then was going and doing the Juice Jar podcast, just making that simple like changes in the way we edited stuff and like the way it blew up, and then you're sort of like, fuck, this can be something. Like.
Yeah.
And then another thing would probably be whenever we started going out and people started coming up to you and shit, like, and you sort of realise how long people actually listen to this, people enjoy this. Like.
Cause
it gives you a purpose. Like.
Yeah, because I think like before that, like you're just looking at numbers. Like.
Yeah.
But then when you actually get people coming up to you and they're like, oh yeah, I love the podcast, and like you actually see an actual person who listens to it, if you know what I mean. It's like, oh fuck, right enough. Huh? I think you hated the Zoom podcast as well.
Yeah. So I'd be so panicky about quality and shit and things done right, and that just pissed me off.
I think the Zoom podcast as well was probably a thing. Like,
it was tough.
Lockdown would have went down. Why did I say it like that? I think lockdown, if it would have went down, if it would have went longer, like there was really a point where like I remember us all talking and being like, I fucking hate doing these. I was like, because there's no like atmosphere. Like you're sitting like in your house in front of your computer, and it was just got so draining. Like.
The thing is though, with the Zoom podcast, like the good thing about that was like it was so easy at that time to make connections, and like if you think about it, we were pretty smart in how we went about things, but where we were still keeping a bit of quality, but we were making connections, we were getting people on because they had nothing to do.
But I think we started it doing ourselves Zoom podcasts, and it got to the stage where it was like, this is shit. Like. And then I think we just made the decision, we're like, right, we'll have to do Zoom podcasts, but like what way can we make it better? So then it was like, why don't we just try and get on guests, because at least then like you're getting something out of it. Like.
But even that brought us difficulties with like people coming on and bad sound quality, bad picture quality. That was a bit of a pain in the ass too.
But I think the picture quality was bad no matter what.
Yeah.
But you were keeping content coming out, and I feel like that's one thing I've learned in the past while with doing this is like, chill out, because like you try and you try and you try, and every time you get kicked in the teeth, it's like, what is the point? Whereas now I'm just like, you know what, we need to be banging out. If we want to grow something, we need to be making the podcast weekly. There can be no gaps in that, and that includes like if we're going on holidays, like just preparing. B, it needs to be consistent in terms of we need to be making sure we're on people's phone screens every day. And like people arse about and say like, oh, consistency's key, but like there is sometimes where you'll put out a thing and you'll be like, that's maybe not like the most funniest clip, but at the same time, like, look at that, like, I'm not being cheeky to your girl Amy, but like, look at that clip we put out, the Just Jar one of her saying about like giving the customer the ice. Like, that's not the most entertaining story we've posted on our TikToks, like, or Instagram, and it got like 3.3 million views. Like, it blew up. Now probably because like no one like really responded looking at our three ugly faces half the time, but at the same time, like, you know, that's the thing, it's like you never know, like you just throw it at the wall and see what sticks really, and happy days. But
like, if it wasn't for getting like doing the Zoom ones and getting guests on, like, would we be where we are now? Like, if we'd never got a guest on, I don't think we would. Like.
And then you always get from guests, it's always like, oh, who do you think we should have on? You get such good ideas from guests.
But
like, over that time in Zoom, like the amount of people who put us in contact with other people,
exactly,
told us who to contact or who would be good and like, why they'd be good.
Getting like the likes of Dave Elliott and Aaron McCann and stuff on at the time was a massive thing. And obviously Bernadette as well.
I was so daunting too the time Aaron McCann was going on. It was like, holy fuck, this guy's fucking huge.
Yeah, because like we do the podcast, and obviously their podcast's one of the biggest ones. It was a big deal.
You really look up to people like that who can actually take the time out, and like there's been guests on, not bad mouthing anybody, but there's guests on, you have them on, they're immediately like out, like left the chat straight away, or that like he was. How long do we chat to him after we stopped recording?
We
like,
chatted them before.
We could have done 2 or 3 podcasts with him at least.
After was good, he's chatting us and even just giving us advice and stuff.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was good.
There's what's been one thing you think you've learned from doing this? I feel like we're talking about this as if we're going to give it up. We're not going to give it up. It's just our 50th episode, and we're getting it. Like,
that's a good question.
I think consistency more than anything too. I think I would have been such a fucking narc for wanting perfect all the time, but sometimes it's alright just to fucking throw something out.
I think that's
It
something
means getting shit out.
because like
From
from
vlogs are a good
I
example.
think from like
yeah.
watching Gary Vee and stuff, I think something I always knew was like if we're consistent, like it's gonna go well. I
Yeah.
always really believed like if we're consistent on TikTok, it's gonna we're eventually gonna get something. Before that Nolan clip, I think like I was getting to the stage where I was like, look, we're being consistent here. What the
Yeah.
fuck? But then that happened, and obviously now,
And it teaches you a skill as well. Like, I know you're being consistent, and maybe at the start you're putting out shit content, but you learn to do it better, and then you learn to do it better quicker.
yeah.
So
I think,
eventually the
We
quality
definitely
obviously goes
learned
up then.
lessons along the way.
I think
Yeah.
the
We
biggest,
definitely
I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing probably is like don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think like you look at all these people, especially in like Northern Ireland, and like they almost look like unreachable, and like you know they would never take the time to speak to you. But like I think from like doing like getting guests on, you've learnt like we've met people like we've had the fucking owner of Job Oxygen on, like a massive drinks company. Like we've met like the owner of Juice Jar, like a massive company, like a business up and coming. Like even like the likes of Grady Gwynn, like David, and
Yeah.
like the likes of David Johnson from IE. Like we had him on the podcast, and then we went and met him and like had a look around his warehouse and stuff, and like things like that. Like I think now it's almost seems like, not to sound like a dick, like, but it's become the norm. Like you're sort of just
Yeah.
chatting to these people regularly now. Whereas like if you'd have said to yourself like a year ago, oh, like you'll meet the guy who owns Job Oxygen, I think that was one person. Like I remember like saying to my ones, and they're like, holy shit, like.
Yeah. And even if you look at like, not naming names, but like guests who it's very likely they're going to be on within the next few months, like there are people who I thought will never touch them, will never even get near them. Like I think that's one thing. Like
What have you learned, like?
I think it really says a lot about just shooting a DM to someone too, just on that.
But even like
Just growing a set of balls and fucking doing it.
like with Gady's podcast, like him saying about Ben Nicky, like,
Yeah,
you followed
yeah,
him,
perfect
100%,
example.
like Ollie Ball followed us on TikTok, and they were like, holy shit, like,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
right.
the ball.
Ben
man.
Nicky followed him, but he messaged him then and actually done something out of it, like.
Yeah.
And now then like he got work from doing the promo for his concert as well.
Yeah.
So like it just shows you, like.
I don't know what I've learned. I think in the past few months especially, one thing that I don't think I've learned, I think I've just come to terms with, is just not even like you're saying about confidence to just reach out to people. I would just say like for me, one of the biggest things was just confidence.
Yeah.
Like you know what I was like at the start, and I second guessed everything, like questioned everything, and that wasn't even just on the podcast in general. But I feel like now it's like I wouldn't, like, anybody who would have brought up the podcast to me at the start, I was just kind of like a wee bit shied away from it, whereas a wee bit embarrassed.
Yeah.
Whereas you see now I'm so like confident in myself, where if anybody, so like even when it comes to like at the start, like you probably would know, like you got the hate comments on TikTok, and it kind of did hit you a wee bit at the start, whereas now like we got that comment which has since been removed on YouTube the other night. Like I don't know whether he deleted it, but I remember laughing my head off, because I'm like, you know what, I'm confident in this now, and I'm confident in myself and you too, and it's like, why like I don't need you to tell me like, oh, one's trying to be funny, one's boring, and one's, I don't even know what it was, but I just screenshot it. Was like, that is so funny, like, because I think it does say more about other people.
Yeah,
Like that is someone who sits and does nothing with their life, whereas at least we can turn around and be like, well, we've actually done something.
Yeah.
I think you need to take the good with the bad though. Like I think you don't really like be like, oh, like we got a good comment there, we got a good comment. You know, it's always the bad ones. Like, and I think like there's been times like I find it weird though, like any time where we've got like a comment where it's been a bit like, oh, that's a bit shit, huh?
Yeah.
You usually get like a DM from someone being like, oh, I love the podcast, and then you're proper like for someone to actually reach out and message you, like.
Yeah.
Like, so like it's just the bigger it gets, you're just gonna get that, like.
Oh,
I was listening to like That Side Men Plus, or like it was like a clip on TikTok, and they were chatting about like mental health and stuff, and they were just basically like, you need to be so thick skinned to be doing what they're doing type of thing.
Yeah.
But like we're obviously,
I know, you look at them and you probably think, oh, they've got it all, like, but obviously they get fucking hate too, like.
Yeah, basically what
I'd say on a bit much larger scale than us, like.
Yeah.
but I think what you actually said something to me one night, and it was in the midst of kind of like, I don't know, I think it was that time where we were talking about the podcast where we had talked about like non-binary, like not identifying as anything, or like identifying as like an object. And I remember at that time I was like, because if you get caught up in that, you can get so sucked in, or like I'm thinking like in 15 years time, whenever this is like the main thing someone
everybody's
could just
non-binary.
dig that up.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at the time, I was completely like, no, we cannot release this.
Mm.
And then me and you had kind of had a tiff over it, where you were like, frigate, I said it, like, you don't need to worry. And I was like, no, like, we need to be sensible here. And then in the end of it, I remember listening back to it and being like, you know what, no, fair play, we'll release it and just see what happens. And I remember whenever we met, like, I think we were all going out that night, like, to do something or whatever, but we were sitting in your flat. And I said something like, it's like, I don't want this to come in between the lot of us, where if I think something, like, if you aren't comfortable with, like, putting out something, or if there's something you said, then I'm not going to force you to, like, put it out.
And then we took our clothes off and had sex.
Like, we were kind of getting in that depth chat where you're like kind of a few drinks in and you're kind of just like spilling out everything, and then you turn around and you said to me, you were like, I don't need any more friends, like, I don't need anybody to, like, make me happy or, like, confirm who I am. It's like I'm happy with everything and we'll just continue on. And I was like, rock on, man. Like, that guy is confident. Like, I was pure buzzing after that. I said, you know what, like, I just need to be like that. Like, frigate, you know what I mean? Absolutely go balls to the wall. You learned what it's like to be friends with a colourblind.
Wow.
Not be mocking any disabilities. But yeah, I think that's a big thing, like the maturity.
Yeah.
And like, God knows where this will be in a year.
Yeah.
I know.
It is strange.
You
like,
may.
Yeah.
You may.
The stars.
where would you like it to be in the future?
I don't know. I think
Like, could you see yourself doing this when you're 30? Or if we were still doing this when we were 30?
I don't say it's stopping.
What's the next stage? What's
I
the
think
next
the
one?
big milestone we're waiting for is 1K subs on YouTube.
In case I'll tear your asses up and
I don't
subscribe.
know. Like, it just.
I went into the Google. I went in not to Google Analytics, the YouTube Analytics the other day, and can you believe 66% of people who listen to this on YouTube aren't subscribed?
So go
So
subscribe.
if you're one of them 66%, flip and click that button.
I know.
You hogging our free content for, at least do something. Like,
Where do you see it in a year? No? Where do you see it in a year? No?
I don't know where I see it in a year, but I think I'm just looking forward to that stage where we just have our own studio. Like.
yeah,
That's the point. That I'm.
If I
Come over.
achieved that on its own would be mad.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big deal.
I think maybe being a bit optimistic, but it'd be like to be in that situation by next year. Maybe not.
That is
Maybe
optimistic,
not.
though.
Maybe not an actual studio, like, but a dedicated area, space.
Yeah.
well, technically we don't own it, but
Yeah.
like, we're paying for a specific space, which is pretty concrete now.
Yeah.
Especially for guests and stuff, it's really, really handy for people to just pop in and
Yeah.
you know. But I do agree with you. Like, I
I'd
think
love to have a wee room with their pictures up on the wall.
Yeah.
Somewhere you can
would
call
just,
home.
yeah, you would just love to have like a wee space where it's not like, you know, you just had a room where it's set up and you could come and go. Like,
Yeah.
if we thought, right, we need to film content tonight, or say if I message someone and they're like, yeah, I can do this week, you're like, right, Wednesday night, you know what I mean, we'll see you up
Yeah.
in Belfast. Like,
Who would be like your dream guest to get on? Like?
Fucking Tommy's Icebreakers.
I just mean, like, if you could have any guest on, like, if the podcast like kept going like for years and years, and what would be like the one guest you were-
currently, right now,
Yeah.
I'm gonna manifest this crap because I feel like we just should, and like, clip this for TikTok if you want and tag him to
Yeah,
Frigg,
you're
because
gonna
I've been
say.
messaging him non-stop. James Smith, like,
Yeah.
you're the PT guy,
Yeah.
he's coming to Belfast to do like a talk,
Yeah.
and every time that person puts up like ask me a question, I keep going like, when are you free in Belfast? Because I'm like, you know what, like, what are you gonna lose? Do you know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
I feel like talking to him would be insane at this
Yeah.
present moment in time. So like, I've messaged him a few times, and like, but the
For
thing
us
is,
every day, it's like,
the
please.
thing is,
Please
and
reply.
I don't
I'll
know,
send you
like,
dick pics.
I don't want to seem entitled here, but it's like, he'll put up a thing where he's like read a message from someone who's like said like, oh, I love your books, or like, oh, like, you're a dick or something like that there, and he'll respond to them, like, he'll read the message and like take the time out to respond to them. So I'm like, if I just keep going, eventually he'll be
Someday.
like, oh my god. But like,
But you need to think like the amount of people will probably ask them to come on their podcast.
I
Like,
know,
Yeah.
but
there's
we're
so
better,
many
realistically. Like,
there's
but
so
if
many
you think about
podcasts.
it, mate, like, all we're asking for is an hour. You know what I mean? We'll provide tea and coffee.
These people are
Do you know
busy.
what I mean?
though.
I don't care.
You need to
I
provide
don't
more
care.
than tea and
We'll
coffee.
provide you tea and coffee.
Have you bought
just-
tickets to the show?
Yeah.
Have you ever
That's a
seen
lie.
him? Have you ever
So you're
seen him?
like,
In,
you
have you ever
want
seen
him-
him in person?
You want him to come to Belfast and do a show and come and do the podcast, but you're not even willing to pay to get tickets.
Well, we'll maybe organise that straight after this podcast.
Okay,
We'll buy
yeah,
tickets.
we'll only
and
go
then
if you
while
come on
he's
our
up on the
podcast.
stage, we'll be like, "Oi,
Ross will be like, I've been fucking messaging you for a year.
You can ignore my DM, but you can't ignore me in real life. Or else
you could
like,
do that thing.
We'll pay for like the meet and greet, the VIP meet and greet, and then right at the very start, I'll come up and he'll be like, "Yo, mate, do you want a photo?" And I'm just gonna whisper in his ear, "Alright, it's me, bitch." And he'll be like, "Oh no, here's the crack boy."
Nightmares.
What about you? If you could have guessed, any guess?
I thought you would have said Marcus Mumford.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Marcus Mumford's definitely but realistically, how likely is
Well,
that to happen in
well,
this
no,
present
but like
moment in time?
anyone.
Oh, like if I could sit down and have a chat with anybody, it would be Marcus Mumford.
Why?
Because
What would you talk to him about? No?
everything. He writes
If you had an
music.
hour, what would you talk to him about? No?
From actually meeting him and from having like a 5-minute conversation with him, whenever I walk away, whenever I think about that moment, I'm like, I wish I would have asked you, delved into so much more. Like, you see that whenever they released Delta, like their last album, I was proper like, they're the only artist that I think I would like genuinely like listen to lyrics and be like, right, what does that mean, and like explore more. So I would love to break down a lot of the songs and be like, what does that, like, what are you talking about there? Like, because I feel like they're the first people I think crap on Mumford and Sons so much because they're like, oh, it's too stereotypical, but like that's the first people, and like Dermot Kennedy would be the same, love to get him on, that I've actually listened to, and I'm like, this is more than just like music. It's like, it is like, there's much more
Deep.
behind it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
like
know
it's
what you mean.
like just
It's
pen to paper
relatable,
type
though.
thing. Like, it's so like, I don't know, it just reaches out and grabs you through the headphones, you know what I mean?
It's weird.
I think I'd have Jake Paul on.
I thought you
Oh,
were
I'd
gonna
ride with
say.
him.
I was gonna
Or
say.
Logan.
I thought you were gonna say
Logan Paul.
Logan Paul.
I would have one of them on. Like.
What would you talk to them about? No?
Just their experiences, like, it just feel like they know something we don't.
Yeah.
Just try and get shit out of them, understand how they can do what they can, but like still come across as wankers and stuff. Like they're basically untouchable. Like.
Yeah. It's
The way they do things, like, it's just so different from anyone else. Like. They literally just fuck about all the time,
Yeah.
do whatever they want, and get paid for it. Like.
No. I really like Logan Paul now, like, but
Yeah.
I still think Jake Paul's a dick, though.
David Dobrik.
David Dobrik would be good. no?
Dobrik would be a
Insane.
good one.
I think one I wouldn't be one of my top, but I think a good one would be this aiming high, but Will Smith.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'd say it would just be so fucking deep and so inspirational.
His content is quite good.
Yeah.
I've heard, well, Nick Grimshaw was basically asked, like, who was, like, the biggest dick he's ever had on the show, like,
Yeah.
type of thing, like one of those type of questions. I don't know if it was, like, the biggest dick, but, like, he basically said Will Smith, like, and he said, yeah, he says, like, it's just a whole, like, it's a whole show, like, it's like the Will Smith character, like, he says, like, he comes in and he's, like, saying to the secretary, he's like, oh, you're the best secretary in the world and all this here shit, and just,
Yeah.
like, talking absolute shit, and you're like, he definitely says that to everyone that comes
Yeah.
in here, like,
Yeah.
or like everywhere he goes. But I suppose that's just, people only get to meet him once, so they're probably like, holy shit, I met Will Smith today, and he's
Yeah.
like, I'm the best secretary in the world.
Yeah.
I feel like if like you could sit down with a group of people as well,
Mm.
the cast of the Avengers would be insane. Like Robert Downey
Oh my
Jr.,
God.
Chris Hemsworth,
I'd actually jizz.
all them ones. Like, because
That'd
like
be
you
sick.
look at Robert Downey Jr. and it's like
Even just him on his own, he'd have
years
mad
ago,
stories.
yeah, years ago he was probably, everyone thought like, this guy's going nowhere, and now
Yeah.
look at him
Yeah.
now. Like, that is
know.
mad.
Proper underdog story.
Yeah.
I'd love to get him on.
I think now we're at a stage where like I don't think we'll have Robert Downey Jr. on, but at the same
You
time
never
it's
know.
like, right, what, like, you have to think like,
I
where,
think it's very much like got the stage where like, why not?
yeah.
You might not.
Maybe some stage.
That's gonna pick that up on that mic, by the way.
Sounds-
You flipping twirling your phone right now.
I'd love to get Ed Sheeran on, or Sam
Mm.
Fender, obviously.
You
Sam
could ask him
Fender.
at the gig.
I'm Sam.
He's so good, man. But
Tom-
I think
Thomas
Ed-
just
I
starts
I think
singing to him.
Ed Sheeran.
Hypersonic missiles. He's like, whoa. Thomas just breaks it.
I think-
That's the first time Thomas sung in my car. When I put Sam Fender on Monday, and like, it wasn't even like, you know, when you're in the car with the lads and like you're going out like getting food or something, and everybody's kind of like singing, but it's like that crap singing where like no one's really trying. But I'll never forget this. Like, one day Thomas is in my car, I put Hypersonic missiles on, and Thomas actually started like giving it a welly, like singing, and I was just like, you definitely do this when you're in the shower.
Obviously.
But like, you put on this like sort of like tone of a voice where you knew it wasn't like you actually singing like how you would normally sing. You were properly giving it a welly, and I was like,
Giving it
all
a
right, Sam
welly.
Fender, get out of my car.
No, his music's class, huh? But I think like Ed Sheeran would have sick stories, though. I think just like,
Yeah.
even from like, he says like he used to get couch surfing stuff when he was first started out. I think he just have mad stories.
Yeah.
Like that story of like him and Justin Bieber went golfing,
Yeah.
And Justin Bieber was like, "Oh, head it out of my mouth and put the tea in his mouth,"
Yeah.
and Ed Sheeran hit him in the face with a golf club. Like
But
just shit like that you wouldn't hear, because I feel like they go on things and it's like, "Oh yeah, so your new single," and it's like, "Oh, your new album," and like what this song and this song, whereas like no one really asks like, "Give me a good story about this."
Like, have you ever watched them ones where like people doing the podcasts and stuff, like, or the radio interviews with Kanye West or Tekashi 6ix9ine, like the one where Tekashi 6ix9ine, he's like, "If I'm on the staircase and a man come behind me with a gun, han han han," and the guy like pure getting into it, and the guy's like, "I don't know what type of gun you've been hearing, like, but I'd love to get someone on who'd just be so like hyped."
Yeah.
Like, get Kanye on, and it's like,
Kanye, oh my god, I feel like he's
"I just told you who I was, a god." You were just sitting there going, "Whoa."
yeah.
You'd just be asking him the stupidest questions, like, and he'd be coming out with such fucking ridiculous answers. Like.
Graham Norton, I think, would be good,
Mm.
because he's from like Ireland as well. I'd like to get
Yeah.
him on.
So what would be like, I know we're chatting, we're manifesting, like, but we're not even manifesting, we're just chatting figuratively.
Chatting
May happen
shit.
in the future, but here, every
You never know.
goal's in up.
Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that. What would be a goal for the next 50 episodes? So between episode 50 and episode 100, what would you like to achieve?
To keep my hair colour. Because I'm going towards raw, so.
Going grey.
Slightly going grey.
Welcome to the dark side.
Imagine.
Embrace it.
He'll have to keep the cap on, and me and him will be like 2 greys on each side.
Thomas is the first person I've met who's actually like said to me, like, I remember saying about my grey hair one day, and Thomas was just like,
Yeah.
"Embrace it. It's a vibe." And I was just like, "Yeah,
It's a
man.
vibe.
Yeah, it is."
Who the fuck has grey hair when they're in their 20s? I think it's cool. Like, there's people that dye their hair grey because they want
Yeah.
their hair to be grey, and you're like, "Ugh, I hate my life."
Remember whenever the guy commented on one of our TikToks and was like, "Is that guy 21 and has nearly a full head of grey hair?" I was like, "I don't have a full head of grey hair. It's kind of like salt and pepper, realistically."
Something like
But I
that.
remember saying to you, and you were just like, "Lad, embrace it. Like,
You
it's a
should have
vibe."
replied
I
and
was
be like,
"Yeah,
"Yes, bitch."
yeah." Do you know what I mean?
What are you manifesting, and what do you want to happen in the next 50 to 100 episodes, since you asked the question?
Not really a goal for the podcast, but like now people are messaging and asking like about getting like us on to their podcasts, and I think
suppose-
we're very selective in terms of like we are like you can't just turn around and be like you say yes to everyone,
Yeah.
because if we were saying yes to everyone, we'd probably be on like 10 podcasts by now, realistically.
I
Yeah.
think it's more like we've actually went to the effort now of like lining up people well in advance, and like when you're trying to get like bigger guests on, like you really need to like give them a good bit of notice. So.
Yeah.
Like there's a few people who are like messaging at the minute, like are big. Like. It's just like you're lining people up, and then you might get the odd one being like, "Oh, I'd love to come on your podcast," and you're like, "Sods, babe."
Yeah. Because it disrupts the flow.
Yeah.
Like at the minute, could pretty much tell you what we're doing until December.
probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like at least the new year as well.
Freak.
And like it's just the way I've kind of organized it,
Yeah.
where I'm like, right, as well as that, I think we do like a recording session on like say like a day, like a Sunday or a Saturday, and we're like we'll take from like 1 o'clock to like 7. So like
Yeah.
we're putting in a shift, you know what I mean, and we're interviewing 2 or 3 people in that day.
Yeah.
But like the reason I'm doing that now is because it's like, right, whenever we were coming up and meeting every single week and recording a podcast every single week, I do feel like it was taking a bit of a, whereas like we went out the other day and yeah, we filmed the vlog and stuff, but like
Yeah.
we were playing foot golf.
Broke it up a bit.
Like that feels like it kind of reconnects everyone, where like I felt like that day I was coming home and I was like, I've had a good day with my mates, whereas when you're constantly up on a Sunday filming a podcast, it just feels like work.
Yeah.
That's how it feels. It begins to almost seem a bit like unfun.
Fortunately, like.
I suppose like if you were to flip the question around, instead of like getting someone on, like if you could be on any podcast, what podcast would you be on?
Impulses.
I knew you'd say that.
Just look ball in the head.
I
Impulsive
think
second.
Jack Mate's Happy Hours class.
Yeah.
I think I'd love to get him
Yeah.
on, Jack Mate. I think he'd be good.
I feel like for Northern Ireland, I would love to jump on a podcast with Dirt Civil, because I've listened to them all the time.
Yeah.
Ian Big. Like.
huh?
Ian Big. Like. If you could go on any podcast, like.
Uh,
I suppose it's personal preference, really.
well, I feel like for
If you had like
yeah.
one ticket, just like any podcast you want, you're Dirt Civil.
No, I think I would be probably Impulsive or Views. David
Views.
Dobrik's one.
I see Tommy Tiernan started a podcast now.
Did he? No, he's
I-
been doing that a while, eh?
It's maybe a couple of months, maybe could be a year. But I don't know about a podcast, but like I think I'd love to go meet him now.
He'd be good.
You see that story he told about living in uni? Was it in uni?
No.
He was living on like fucking. He was living on the dole for like 6 years.
Right.
And like him and like 6 other guys lived in this house, and they basically just left in mattresses in the hallway and all. Lived in the dole for like 6 years, and decided one day, right, had enough, like, and then just fucking started his career from there. But like he says, he used to like buy a loaf of bread, and he used to last them the week, like, and maybe if they were lucky, they get a bit of butter on it.
Holy shit.
Like, can you imagine Tommy? That was what Tommy Tiernan was living on at one point. Like,
I think
where it's come from. Like,
I think it would be.
That's mad.
I think it would be cool to do, like, have you ever seen them Dude Perfect? You know, the trick shot guys.
Yeah.
Would love to do a video with them.
well, after the fuck off there on what day was that?
Sunday.
Sunday. I don't think the trick shots would be very good. Like.
Here, but
You'd be in there often.
try it, like, try it and see.
Well, if there's a wee patch of rough like that was like an inch wide, like you could land it.
Yeah.
I bet.
I don't
And
like.
faith.
I feel like I would love to. I like that would be the thing in the next while where I feel like if you got a podcast where you knew off it, like you knew it was a lot bigger than this, and they were messaging you and being like, "Do you want to come on and like just hop on a podcast?" I think I'd be like, right, this is going somewhere, because I think it would take the pressure off as well in terms of like obviously you're producing and whatnot and you're editing and all, but
Yeah.
I feel like just hopping on someone's podcast and actually like chatting about like how we grew this would be good crack. What who's been your favourite guest so far?
Ooh,
By the way,
tough
all our
question.
guests have been good. I can
Loved all
honestly,
them equally.
I can 100% say there's no one that's been on this podcast where after they've left I was like, they're a
Yeah.
dick.
I
So
think
this is quite a hard
Chris
list.
Suter was one of my favourites though.
Yeah,
I
he's
think he had just
mad,
had
like.
really good stories. Like the stories are the best part. Like actually just stuff that has happened. Like Chris Suter saying about like playing Rory McIlroy when he was young. Like.
Yeah.
Like before he, like when he was like a young golfer, like, and you knew he was gonna be class, and just like stories I got.
Yeah.
Jawbox Jerry was obviously mad getting on, like learning about like how he built his business and like
His stories
how-
are class too. Like.
yeah, how he tried like a load of different businesses and then eventually done Jawbox Gin and started it like so late in his life. You're like, that's cool.
It was
Yeah.
different. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like your normal success story coming from nothing.
Yeah.
But he literally, what age was he when he started? Like 60 something? Was he 60?
I think it might have been 50s, 60s, but I think it's like that
Or maybe
podcast
69. Yeah.
didn't even do as well as we thought it would, but like it was still like a class podcast.
Yeah.
What would be your favourite one?
Actually, do you know what? I think Juice Jar.
I think it's
in
like
terms
the
of
one.
crack wise,
I feel like as soon as we started that Just Jar podcast and like Layla just lit up and
Yeah.
started, like I was just like, you
Yeah.
know what, this is going to be just a good vibe podcast
Yeah.
in terms of
Yeah.
like the convert, and then with Layla sort of lighting up, I think then that kind of brought Amy
Yeah.
out of her shell a bit,
yeah.
and like we were just having like that felt like the most easiest podcast to
Yeah.
record because it was just a
Yeah.
conversation, whereas you
Yeah.
feel like sometimes you're extracting information out of
Yeah.
people.
And it's weird too, like, because they're not famous.
Yeah,
Like.
yeah. They probably weren't used to like
Yeah,
three
probably.
lads coming like, oh here's
Yeah.
3 mics
Behind the camera.
Yeah,
And,
I think it's like as well as like the podcasts you think are gonna do well. You're like when you get the guests on, you're like that's gonna be sick, and like they are good. Like, but it's the ones like that where like you weren't really going into being like, oh, this is gonna be massive. But it was more like, yeah, it's a class story with Juice Jar and like where it's came. But then the girls were like class crack and really
Yeah.
funny. And so it
just
obviously,
click, like, yeah.
my favorite was probably Aaron McCann, but I regret
Yeah.
doing Aaron McCann's over Zoom. I wish we'd
Yeah.
done it with
But
him
it's
in
good we
person.
got him on
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
But like hopefully someday he comes back on.
It was just weird because I remember going and seeing Colin Geddes in Ballymena in the Braid. In Ballymena, like doing like a set, and Aaron McCann come on beforehand, and I remember I was in tears, like laughing. This guy's so funny, like you just know, like not licking anybody's ass here. You just know he's going places, like.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
funny.
And as soon as he came on, it was just like it's as if you've known him for ages.
Yeah.
That's how it felt.
He
But
was so sound. Like.
yeah, I would love
Fun.
to actually get him and because I feel like with him and Tim, like listening to their podcast, it's like you do feel like you're just in a room with them, like sort of joining in the
Challenge,
crack. So
yeah.
like it would be good to actually get them on, and I feel like it'd be funny. Like
We've learnt as well, like like just having chats with people is far better than like an interview. So
Yeah.
I think I'd
Yeah.
love to get them on and just like chat to them and just have the crack instead of like with him. It was good crack and like he had good stories, but it was more just like asking them questions. Though.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
What about you? So you said Juice Jar,
Juice
didn't
Jar,
you?
yeah.
Did you give your favorite podcast?
Yeah, I think I said. Well, my favorite
Aaron McCann, you
podcast, my
said?
favorite podcast so far what is, I always look back and I'm like
BB guns and Beyblades?
Beyblades and BB guns, or
I did not know what happened that day, but
Well,
everything just went so well.
everything just went. And then that one where we were talking about like someone breaking into your house, and you were just like, if I was naked, I'd be like getting up to like get dressed, and I was like, so a guy's literally like, I've literally binged about 8 series of Criminal Minds, so I know as soon as that guy comes through the front door, you have 10 seconds. You know what I mean? But you're just sitting there going like, oh, I'd be getting my jeans on and like, you know, just kind of chilling, like maybe pour myself a wee cup of coffee and wait for him to come up the stairs, and I'm like, no, I'd be out. And then we started sidetracking, and for some reason then we go on to like switching from your primary to your
Talking
secondary.
about if you got
But
me
I
getting
was
robbed,
actually
or
howling
getting
at that.
shot. It's mad how we done that podcast talking about me getting robbed, and then I did get robbed.
I was going to say that.
Manifested.
Manifested, guys. It can
What the
happen.
fuck?
Pity you weren't there, like, to run away.
Oh no.
Could have told us.
Could have
what-
tested out the theory.
Yeah.
Be like, right, bye, so this is what actually happened.
Imagine
Next
though.
Belfast Live a week later,
I-
man running down Belfast with a fucking 7 foot slong, like, trips over it.
Switching from a primary to a secondary, you're shielding up behind a
Boy.
car.
Oh, so funny.
But I was actually thinking this the other night, like, whoever, you're out of the apartment now, so like you really don't care,
Yeah.
but like whoever robbed your apartment had to have been casing that joint out to know you were away, because when they robbed you was whenever we were obviously all up for your
Yeah.
birthday.
Yeah.
But like imagine they were like, he's definitely gone,
Yeah.
and like you were just lying in your bed, and the next minute you just dump, like glass shatters, and the next minute they come into your room and you're just sitting there like, because like I doubt they were wearing masks or anything, so they probably would have just walked in and looked at you, and it would have probably been that 5 seconds of awkwardness where the guy's like, oh, we've really fecked up here, haven't we?
Yeah.
And
We're
you're
just
just
telling
like,
you.
what are you doing?
Bruno was telling me a story of like someone she works with or something, or like one of her mates was saying like there's one time like she nearly got robbed, and like the boy tried to like climb in the window, and she like was like in the kitchen or something, and she just walked into the kitchen and like looked at the boy, and the boy looked at her, and she was like, what are you doing? They obviously just ran off like.
I remember whenever I worked in Carphone, there was one time I was standing at the till and literally heard this like big massive thud, looked
Yeah.
over and the iPhone display was like shaking, and the guy had literally ripped one of the iPhones off the wall, but instead of just darting, he remained in the shop as if nothing happened. So I walked up, and like I was like kind of overseeing the shift, so
Yeah.
I walked up and I was just like, well mate, and I could see him putting the phone in his pocket, and I was like, you know anything about where that phone went? And he's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, you were down here like 2 seconds ago and it started shaking. I was like, did someone come in and like rip the phone off the wall and run off, like trying to catch him out? And he was just like, I was just looking at the phone and pointed to where the phone was ripped off the wall. And I was like, yeah, the phone that, I was like, was that phone there? And he was like, yeah. And I was just like looking at him like, you know that I know that you know that you stole this. So just
Should I just turn around and go, let me see your
so I
fucking
turned
pockets
around
then?
and I just like, there's 3 people in the shop at the time, and I was just I just turned around and I thought, I'm gonna catch you out, because that's one thing I don't like is lies. And I was just like, I'm gonna
You are a liar.
You're gonna learn today. So I was just like,
You're not
right,
gonna lie
everybody.
again, bitch.
I was like, right, everybody. I was like, just for security reasons, I was like, I'm just gonna call security. If everybody could just remain in the shop, we've just had a theft. So I went out the back and like put the code in to go out the back to like phone center security, and literally just this like knock at the door, came back out, it was the same guy, and he was like, I found that phone on the floor. And I was like, did you frig? And
What
he
did
was
you
just
say
like,
to
I was like,
him?
right. And he was like, it was like below, like, you know, and like making up this big elaborate story. And I was like, how did you find it? And he was like, I dropped my keys, and when I like bent down I seen it. And I was like, right. And he was like, listen, like, he was like, I'm already on the sort of police radar. He was like, I don't want to be brought into anything, because like as soon as the police come in, they're gonna just assume it was me. And I was like, yeah, definitely. And like it's just kind of looking at him like this, so awkward, because I sit and looking at him going like, where do we go from here?
You
Because
could've
like
ruined
you
his life.
blatantly stole from us.
Yeah.
Then he walked off, and by that stage, one of the people that I was working with had like waved center security, and so as soon as they came in, I was like, listen, I was like, I don't want any trouble here, but like that guy's definitely stole like that phone. I was like, you give it back to us. So they started going after him. Big massive scene made outside the centre, and they're all pointing at me through the glass window, and I was sitting going like, touts out, like what the heck?
Stitches get
Next minute,
stitches.
you guy came back into the shop, and I was like, he's definitely gonna bury me. Like he came
Yeah.
back in, and the security guard from the centre was with him, like escorting him into our shop.
Yeah.
And he was like, "How would you like to proceed?" And I was
Did
just
they
like,
ask you
"La-
that?
Yeah. And I was just like,
You're
"Lad,
like, fucking lock him up,
I-
please.
10-4."
So he just walked in. He's like,
squat comes bursting through the
I
ceiling.
love the way they're
"Were
like,
you a manager or anything like?" Or
No, but like our manager had left, so it was
What
like
the
whoever
fuck,
was
man?
most senior in the store
Oh,
just like
right.
got
That's so funny.
passed the mantle basically to lock
Ross
up.
just speaking for careful.
I
But
love the
like
way you're
I was
like-
just sitting there and I was just like,
take him out the backless waterboard and get the truth out.
what do you know? Tell me everything. But he turned around and he came back in and I was just like I was
Oh
like,
my
right,
God.
I could not be bothered with this. Like I'm 20, I have enough on my plate. Like I don't need to be like, because I was like, the police are going to come in and
I'm
like
20,
make a
like,
big song and dance about this. And I was like, I don't know this guy as well. Like low on my luck, I'll come out at 9 o'clock to open my car and he'll be like, I remember me. Here's Johnny, Michael and Francis, my 3 older brothers, get the crap kicked out of me.
Oh my god.
So I turned around and I was like, listen, I was like the phone was there. I was like I can't prove anything. There's no CCTV here. I was like, so like appreciate the phone. Like I looked at him and I was like, appreciate you giving me back the phone, which you freaking stole.
Yeah.
I was like, I
Yeah.
appreciate you giving me back the phone. And he shook my hand and all. He like leant over the counter, he shook my hand, he's like, thanks for being so sound, and just walked off. And I was just sitting going like,
you should have grasped his hand so hard and just been reeling him back in and being like, "I hate liars."
never come back into my store again. But there was
definitely.
a time in Carphone where we actually caught a thief. We went
Right.
after him.
I think you've told me this
We went
later.
after
Usually
him,
you
like-
just let them away.
I was standing and this guy came in, worked for the education authority, may I add. But he was sitting and he was like, looked like he was up to no good, like looked like he was up to dodgy thing. You know when you just know there's a boy that's just not quite right. And I was sort of looking at him, and then I sort of thought, right, gonna go back to my James Bond knowledge, so art of evasion. So I looked away from him, but like looked in a mirror, so I could see him, but he didn't know I was watching him. Lifted one of the cases and bolted out the door.
No way.
And I was like,
Did he proper run out?
oh, like bolt it,
Like a phone case.
This was before he'd lifted the case. I looked at him and then he went over to like a family. He was with a certain family who was like a bunch of Romanians. So I was like,
okay.
right, you're clearly not anything to do with them. But he
Yeah.
was over and he was just like, nice phone, isn't it? Like trying to blend in. And I was just like, you're acting so Casey. Like,
Yeah.
and then I was like,
Casey, I see what you did there.
seen him in the mirror, walked out the door with a case, and I was like, I was right all along. Like,
I knew
so
it.
I turned around, I went out the door, and like the adrenaline pure running through me. Like I was like, I can catch this criminal. Like
Just
he walked out through the door of the Tower Centre. And I remember walking up behind him, and I was like, sir, that there. I was like,
Did you do the big deep voice and all?
And
Sir.
he looked at me and he bolted down the street.
Yeah.
So I was like, right, I'm not running after you because at this stage was near 18 stone, and I was like, I'm not gonna make it. Like, but I have a video. Like, I genuinely, I have a video of him running because I was like, I'm
Did you
gonna
stop and video him?
Yeah, I literally whipped out my phone and videoed him running down the street away from me. I wasn't running after him.
It's like
But
those
I was-
police chasing shows.
I
Like
was
they're
standing
all
at the top of
videoing
the street.
himself in the yard.
But
Can we get the helicopter out,
my
guys?
my mate Darren, who worked with me at the time, is very like, no, you're chatting crap. So I was like, as soon as your boy started running, I was like, this is too good to make up. But like, I know I'm gonna get back into that shop and say to Darren, your boy bolted off a case. I tried to intercept him and he ran off.
Intercept him, oh
So
my
I
God.
literally just whipped out my phone, like the quick click sort of camera thing, and literally just took a video and zoomed up of him literally bolting down the street with this case in his hand.
Yeah.
So I come back in the shop and I was like, Darren, like there's been a bit of a situation. I was like, he stole that case, and it was like, looking back at it now, it was a $9.99 case, so like nothing really but he was like, did he run out towards the car park? And I was like, yeah. And Darren's like, justice in order, we're going out. So me and
Yeah.
Darren walked out to the car park. We're sitting scanning around the car park. Next minute I see him walking down the other side of the street.
Yeah.
I turned around and I goes, Darren, that's him. And Darren's like, are you sure? So Darren walked like to the other side of the street and started taking photos of him.
Yeah.
But like Darren actually did take a photo of him, and like he sent it to me, and you can see the case below the guy's shirt.
No
Yeah.
way.
But he walked across the street and he came up to Darren. He's like, what are you taking photos of me for? And Darren was just like, were you in Carphone recently there, sir? And he was just like, no. And I was just like, I looked at him and I was like, what? Like, I was looking at Darren going like, are you serious? Like, he's lying. And Darren was like, what's below your shirt? And it was one of like a white shirt, so you could see on it
No
Huawei
way.
P20 Lite like essentials pack. And Darren was like, what's that below your shirt? And he was like, it's just a book.
A book.
And then Darren was like, okay,
Where you're like,
Darren.
I hate liars. And there's rugby
Darren
tackle.
played it so well. Darren was just like, okay, well, there's a centre CCTV, so we'll be making sure that we'll get access to that within the past 10 minutes of the case going missing. But pretty sure it was you, so like we'll remember you, and like read his name badge and was like, we'll remember your name.
He had a name badge.
Yeah.
on? What?
Worked for
what a
he worked for
spa.
the EA, like,
Oh my
or something like
God,
that. Like
what a
I think it
prick.
was an actual organisation who you thought, like, you know, like thieves can come from anywhere,
It's
obviously,
like-
but you're kind of like, right, okay.
Thieving 101, take your fucking name badge off. Like,
Exactly.
Jesus
But like,
Christ.
he turned around and he was like, listen lads, I don't want any trouble, and handed us the case back and walked off, and we were just like, what? This is
Why
madness.
do
Like,
this, like?
I would have been taking him down to the old Bailey for the fucking grief he put me through. Like. Making you chase him down the street and all, like.
and being like, it's all good, sir. And as soon as he reached out to shake his hand, just whipped out a cable tie and just brought it to the grounds.
Indiana Jones him.
Just, you have the right to remain, or what's the guy? This is a citizen's arrest.
Oh my God.
We were very sidetracked there.
Oh my God.
How did we get onto that?
Don't know.
They're probably the best stories you've ever told ever.
I can't believe I've never
You
brought
usually
that
start
before.
telling a story and like go on a pure tangent, and you're just like, what was the point of this? And you're like, oh yeah, I've got a good story, boys, and then it's like, what?
Take that as an inverted compliment.
What was your funniest moment of the podcast then?
I think
Apart from that, boom,
Beyblades
boom.
one, like.
The Beyblades was definitely funny.
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
I think we should end it there. Like.
Yeah.
I think it was good end.
End on a high because
50 podcasts.
We're gonna
in
be
it.
high.
Ross is
Ian
actually
what are you joking about that?
OJ.
Because we're gonna end this podcast and the podcast on a high.
Yeah.
In
Listen.
Because we're doing it for the rest of our
I
lives.
think it goes without saying, if you have listened from episode 1 to 50, we actually do appreciate you.
Thanks.
Yours are legends,
And you must be sick in the head.
yeah, you must be absolutely sick in the head to listen to us. But here, we're 50 podcasts in. Here's to the next 50. Go on, go, ah,
You bet, yeah.
yeah, boy, yeah.
Get up them stairs.
On ahead, aye. But yeah,
Right, thanks.
thanks very much for listening.
Thanks.
Good night. Bye.